Taiwan is one of the most pro-Japan countries in the world, a country with strong Japanese influence where people love Japanese culture. They get along politically and economically despite having endured 50 years of harsh Japanese colonization. I'm Naka, this is Japatonic. Stay tuned for a super interesting video on Japan's colonization of Taiwan. The fact is that in 1895, Japan won the war against China, although Taiwan was under the control of the Qing Empire. After losing the war, the Qing administration left Taiwan, and the Taiwanese said, oh well, the Qing are gone, now we're independent. They said, that's it, this is our country and it's settled, but no. Japan said, we won, now give me Taiwan. So there was a resistance in which some Taiwanese fought against the Imperial Japanese Army, but it wasn't a very strong force. Therefore, it took Japan a total of 6 months to gain absolute control of the island of Taiwan. Japan was becoming a colonizing country. Japan wanted to expand, and Taiwan was what they wanted to make their own, their first model colony. Being a model colony meant Japan provided Taiwan with infrastructure, hospitals, schools, and modernization. Trains like this one in the town called Jifen. And Jifen means 10 parts because originally only 10 families lived here. And from what they earned working, those families would share it among themselves. But since it was an area with coal, the Japanese built tracks for freight trains, brought in many workers, and it became a mining town. It's not a metropolis, it's still a town, but it grew from just 10 families. It went from having hundreds to thousands of people. Many live here now. Gradual assimilation also occurred. Yes, obviously at first there were many deaths, indoctrination, but things weren't as bad as in China and Korea. The reason, to explain it in a simple and short way, is that Taiwan offered very little resistance. Therefore, it was kind of quote-unquote easy. And they were already somewhat colonized to begin with. Therefore, there was no need to resort to so much violence. On the other hand, in Korea and China, since there was a lot of resistance, they suffered much more there. Look, there was exploitation here too, there were comfort women, there was a bit of everything that happened in Korea and China, but at much lower levels. But look, after 35 years of colonization, that's when Japan made it a rule that only Japanese would be taught in schools. That is in 1930. So it took them 35 years. Although colonization in China and Korea was much shorter, for example, Koreans experienced change almost overnight. China and Korea did not have time to assimilate. Let's say the Taiwanese did, and control was more administrative or police-like, not mainly military. If Japan wanted something from Taiwan, they would take it. That was the main idea of the Japanese Empire. The goal was to educate their new little dogs. Taiwan was a real experiment in colonization because they truly wanted Taiwan to become just another province or prefecture of Japan. That was the goal. In fact, there were even Taiwanese who fought in World War II as Japanese, which became quite complicated when World War II ended, because they were kind of identified. Officially, they were considered Japanese, but not nationals. It was a strange situation at the time. By the way, in this town, you can release paper balloons. People make wishes on them. Depending on the color, it represents a certain type of wish. For example, yellow is for money, pink is for happiness. It's actually pretty small. The tracks are over there, one block here and one block on this side. It's nice when the train passes by and there are some waterfalls nearby. By the way, when I came here 2 years ago, I came here and I didn't really like the idea of people releasing balloons because when you walk around later, you see the balloons lying everywhere. But, well, they say that people from the area, there are people who take care of picking them up. And you do see people picking them up from time to time. And there is a monetary compensation of 10 Taiwanese dollars for each piece of paper that is recycled. Because it's not just paper, it also has a bit of aluminum, metal to hold the fire. I'll tell you that the last time I came, I walked by and you could see the paper would burn up after 20 meters and your wish lasted literally 30 seconds. But anyway, and the most famous dish in this town is the chicken wing stuffed with rice. It's good, I had it before, I had it just a little while ago, just now. It's not amazing, but well, it's pretty good. It's funny because it's a chicken wing They deboned it and stuffed it with rice. Look, the guide told me that this place is run by a grandma who's almost 100 years old, who gives massages or reads palms. I do not know what it was about, but they told me there was a shop owned by a lady who had the Japanese flag because she was, let's say, pro-Japan. I mean, she was a person with pride, with the Japanese identity, let's say, but obviously native, born in Taiwan. Now, in 1930, what was called the Mucha Massacre happened. It turns out that the people who suffered the most during the Japanese colonization were the Aborigines, the natives of Taiwan. And there was a tribe called Sidik. One day in 1930 at a wedding, because of a dispute over alcohol, a Japanese policeman beat the son of Mona Rudao, who was the Sidik leader. And this single blow was what broke the camel's back, because they were suffering discrimination, mistreatment, and they were forced to do very poorly paid jobs. Therefore, about 300 Sidiks attacked a school exclusively for Japanese. And on that very day, there was a school sports event happening. Surely what is called undokai. And they killed 134 Japanese, men, women, and even elementary school children. 134 Japanese. What was the result? 1,000 Sidiks were killed because of this mass murder. And what is more, Mona Rudao took his own life so he would not be caught. Exactly. What is more, there is a 2011 movie based on this whole story called Warriors of the Rainbow. Honestly, I did not watch it because I really could not find it. If you find it, it must be good. At least knowing the historical context, it is nice to hear stories like that. Now, Mona Rudao is considered a national hero because he was a symbol of resistance against colonization during tough times, especially for a group that was extremely marginalized and discriminated against. The landscape is beautiful. In 1880, in this town called Yofen, they found gold. And of course, 15 years later, when they arrived, the Japanese exploited mining in this place to the extreme. Well, Jofen, just like Shifen, the previous town, means 9 parts because there were 9 families who came down from the mountains to buy something, I guess. Toilet paper. Someone would buy 9 and then split it into 9 parts. That is why it is called 9 parts, Jofen. And from 9 families, it ended up being quite a big town. But here, the workers were really exploited. In fact, it is said that many of the workers came here by force. The pay was very low and the working conditions were terrible. I mean, it was very dangerous to work in this area. It was not slavery because right on the mountain next door, there was a gold mine, and there was slavery because they were prisoners of war. On that side, for example, there is what is called the Memory Museum because of the enslavement of the people who worked in that mine. But on the other hand, here there is a bit of pride in the identity of the people. Not to glorify imperialism, but more than anything, a working class pride. If it were not for mining, this town would not be what it is today. And the views around here are beautiful. Actually, I came here 2 years ago on my honeymoon and we stayed 2 nights in a hotel. It was in this town and the views were beautiful. But honestly, 2 nights was too much. 1 night would have been enough. But the place is extremely beautiful. Honestly, it is very nice. This is the most famous view of this town, which is a tea house. This place. It was said that Chihiro's journey was based on this place. But the fact is that a television show interviewed Hayao Miyazaki and said to him, "Oh, it is great that you were inspired by a landscape from Yufen for the movie." And Miyazaki said, "Sorry, but I do not know what place you are talking about. I am really sorry, but it does not ring a bell." And of course, it is complete appropriation. I mean, there are a lot of places that say, inspired by Chihiro's journey. But the reality is that Chihiro's journey is Asian architecture. It has been completely exploited, that is it. It is not that it is based on a place in Japan, because I think there are at least 2 places in Japan, an onsen and more, said to inspire Chihiro's journey and other stories. Beautiful. This place is very nice. And honestly, the town is actually pretty big. It is not that small. Honestly, you can tell that a lot of people have come to live here. In fact, there is more. It is said that between 1920 and 1930, this town even had a movie theater, bars, brothels, tea houses. This area had a lot of urban activity. But when the gold and copper ran out around the 70s, after Japan had already left, it became kind of a ghost town. Suddenly there was no activity at all because, of course, all the mining work had completely ended. But in the 90s, that is when they rediscovered the place as a tourist spot. Honestly, as a tourist spot, it became really popular because it is a town with lots of shops and it has beautiful views. And from downtown Taipei, it is about an hour or even a little less by bus. But this whole place really was key for Japan in World War II because with the amount of gold and copper that was obtained from the work here, that helped the war economy a lot. Japan honestly got to where it did largely thanks to the mining that was in these mountains. It is super labyrinthine and chaotic here. At night it is beautiful too. At night they turn on the lights, the areas with views change, very nice. Now I do not know how they are going to. Now I do not know how the addresses are here, like for you to get mail. It is complicated, but it is good because there is that mix of tourist area and authenticity of a small town. Walk half a block and you see a real little town. Let us see the stinky tofu. I tried it 2 years ago, well more. Let us go inside. I tried this 2 years ago, honestly. It was from a street stall. Honestly, this smells bad. It smells like a sewer. And I thought the neighborhoods in Taipei were dirty and smelled like a sewer. But no, the city does not smell bad. What smelled bad was this food. But Taiwanese people love it. I said I had to try it. No, this is really bad. No, this really smells like a drain. No. We leave leftovers and throw them away. Since this is not a street stall, should I give it a second chance? Honestly, this one does not taste like anything. Tofu itself lacks flavor. Well, seasoned tofu can stand out, but honestly, this one is pretty bland. It is just regular tofu. I thought it would have a stronger flavor. No, but honestly, the one here, it is edible. Yeah, but at least it smells less bad than 2 years ago. 2 years ago, the entrance to the town smelled really bad. Everything smelled like stinky tofu. Now it smells less. Maybe that means it has less flavor and is less intense. There will be 2 videos from Taiwan, or at least 2 that are already done. And I think today I will make one more exclusively for members. You already know, next to the subscribe button, there is the join button. $2.50 a month and you get access to an extra new video every week. Those who cannot, Japatonic stays the same. Every Monday night, there are Japatonic videos. The members thing is just a simple extra. But in 1945, Japan loses the war. And what does that do? That the Japanese country has to return all the conquered lands, obviously including Taiwan, of which out of the 350,000 Japanese citizens who were living in Taiwan, they were repatriated, which represented 6% of the population. And at that time, when Japan withdrew, China was governed by the Republic of China. That is the Republic of China under Jiang Jieshi, meaning the nationalist one, not the communist one. As we already mentioned in the previous video. So this island ends up being governed by the Kuomintang, but Jiang Jieshi was not settled in Taiwan. He was in the mainland China that we know. Until 1949, when Jiang Jieshi, the Republic of China, loses to the People's Republic of China, right? Mao Zedong's China. And that is when Jiang Jieshi finally comes to settle on the island of Taiwan. Now, when Jiang Jieshi arrived in Taiwan, the Taiwanese were expecting him as a savior, as a liberator. with more autonomy, with democracy or something, whatever a capitalist country might bring, right? But what they found was a militarized authoritarian system which then banned the Japanese language. Now, the Taiwanese had to learn Mandarin, which is the language spoken in mainland China, even though before the Japanese invasion, Taiwan spoke Taiwanese. The writing is the same as Mandarin, but the phonetics are completely different. It is basically like a dialect of Chinese. Well, there were also several dialects that belong to native tribes. But anyway, the topic of languages is honestly a mess in this country. But the thing is, the issue of languages in this country has always been very, very complex. They were never able to have a single defined language where everyone in the country speaks the same language. Where I am now is what is called the Peace Park 228. That comes from February 28th, which in the previous video I explained what happened on February 28th, 1947. In which some soldiers beat up an old woman who was selling contraband cigarettes and confiscated the goods she worked with. And the fact is that since Chiang's administration seemed very corrupt and inefficient, people saw that in the short time Chiang was in Taiwan, things were getting much worse. And that was the last straw. Since it happened in a public space, people protested. But it is a long story that starts with that small point and ends with 20,000 Taiwanese killed by the military of Chiang Kai-shek. The peace in this country is incredible. A homeless person sleeping on the stage of the amphitheater, a lady drinking tea in the seat of the amphitheater. Yes, it is a pretty safe country. Here people do not usually steal. Taxi drivers just keep a few extra coins. Okay. It is not like they are scamming you or charging you double either. But yesterday they kept a big change because I made a mistake with a coin and they just said, okay, thank you. And today the guy was supposed to give me 5 Taiwanese dollars as change, but he just said, thank you. And that time I did not care because 5 Taiwanese dollars are just cents. Honestly, that did not bother me at all. And lots of scooters. There are so many scooters in this country, everywhere. And a lot of scooter parking too. Not many people on bikes though. Well, and another thing the Japanese did with Taiwan when they invaded the country, in Taiwan, 2 main religions are practiced, Buddhism and Taoism. And the fact is that Japan has Buddhism and Shintoism. So there was no problem with Buddhism because they had that in common, but they did not like the presence of Taoism, which came more from mainland China. So what did they do? They destroyed all the Taoist temples. And how did they recognize them, considering that both religions had similar architecture? Well, the fact is that Taoism is characterized by having sacred figures of beings with very long beards, like these. But on the other hand, in Buddhism, they use golden statues, not made of gold, just golden. So what did many Taoist temples do? They placed golden Buddhist statues in Taoist shrines. I liked it because it was very clever. Also, it is really hard to tell the differences. Since there was a golden statue and they knew it belonged in Buddhist temples, they passed the inspections. And after that February 28th incident, that is when martial law was imposed, and Taiwan suffered the longest period of martial law in contemporary world history, which lasted 30 years. And that basically made Taiwan live through decades of fear. This really made it stand out. From the militarized era under the Republic of China and Japanese colonization. The Kuomintang's poor administration, repression and authoritarianism were very obvious. When Japan, like Taiwan, had already been invaded quite a lot several decades earlier, the time of greatest suffering had basically already passed. And Japan really wanted Taiwan to be part of Japan. Therefore, they were indoctrinating in the most positive way possible. Of what was possible, obviously. Also, Japan was already quite busy with the issue of China, Korea, with the whole war situation, so Taiwan was not so militarized. I mean, there was regular police, so to speak. But it really depends. Because when Japan left and the Kuomintang came, the Taiwanese used to say, the dogs left so the pigs could arrive. I mean, we are going from bad to worse. But anyway, the thing is that the general memories of Japan were that it was an authoritarian administration, but an efficient one. A clear legal system, education, modern values, although Japanese values, which gave them that big identity problem, being Japanese but not officially Japanese.
Speak Mandarin!
Long live the Taiwanese!
But on the other hand, with the Republic of China, the comparison was that they were violent, corrupt, inefficient, unjust, and repressive. Therefore, the general opinion of Jiang Jieshi is quite varied, although the vast majority did not like him very much. Therefore, the monument to Jiang Jieshi, which was put up by his son, is a bit controversial. I do not know if there are many Taiwanese who will go to visit it, but basically that is why many Taiwanese think that the time when they were with Japan was better. But let us see. The following brief analysis is a completely personal perspective based on what I learned from the history of Taiwan. It is just that, look, in the same way that Japan ended up being an ally of the United States after losing to the United States, when Japan withdrew from Taiwan, it was not necessarily going to be on bad terms with Taiwan. Therefore, after the war, for Japan to be allied with Taiwan, since they were running a capitalist system, an anti-communist system, there was no reason for them to stop being allies, right? I mean, we were not, but well, it is all good. I mean, at least I think it makes a lot of sense. And the thing is, look, nowadays they have already told me, for example, my guide from yesterday, the thing is, Taiwanese people love Japan. I mean, they love Japanese culture. They consume everything that is anime. They go to Japanese restaurants. They eat Japanese food. They go to Japan on vacation. Taiwanese people love all things about Japan. To the point that where we are now, they call it Little Shibuya. It is like a way of twinning neighborhoods, right? In the same way, there is a crossing that they also call the Little Shibuya crossing, something like that. But something that I found really funny is that the cultural rival of the Taiwanese would be Korea, right? It is like that is the country they compete against. In the same way that, for example, in Argentina, the Argentine national team has to play against Brazil, it is like the whole country stops and everyone has to watch the Argentina-Brazil match. Well, in the case of Taiwan and Korea, if they play baseball together, everyone stops to watch the baseball games against Korea. And to the point that there are people, a small minority, I think it is about 1 in 10 or 20 people, who do not consume Korean products. I mean, they buy a phone that is not Samsung, not the LG one, nothing like that. That is something really funny that caught my attention. Because there is really no reason to be rivals. Because historically there is no rivalry between those countries, right? And besides, Japan supplies a lot to Taiwan, a whole lot. I mean, you go to a 7-Eleven and half, maybe even more than half of the products there are Japanese. Japanese brands. And when you go to electronic stores, you see signs for Japanese brands like Sony, Nikon, Canon. I mean, Japanese brands are also the ones leading the Taiwanese market. When I came here 2 years ago, I had no idea about anything. I noticed the country had strong Japanese influence, and then I started to research why Taiwan had so much Japanese influence. And that is how the 2 videos about Taiwan came out. But obviously the identity of a Taiwanese person is that they are Taiwanese. People nowadays consider themselves Taiwanese. They do not consider themselves Chinese at all. And for the most part, they do not consider themselves Japanese either. But look, a lot of people describe Taiwanese as Chinese, but with Japanese manners. Seeing so much influence and so much cultural friendship between Taiwan and Japan, it is like now, I became much more interested in the history of Taiwan, and I'm more concerned about the situation with China. Because honestly, it is a very beautiful country. It would hurt me a lot. Honestly, I would be very sad if this country were taken over by the People's Republic of China and had that identity problem again. But look, considering it was a nation that suffered a lot, honestly, if one day Taiwan actually achieved its independence and could officially have its Independence Day, I think I would celebrate it myself and cry with joy. Because honestly, they deserve it, since their own society shows how well they can manage on their own, right? I honestly enjoyed it a lot. Researching and making these videos, I hope you can appreciate it. Remember that in the members section, You have more videos about Taiwan, so see you next time. Greetings to you, your family, your pet, and your annoying neighbor. Bye. Honestly, I see more tattoos, fewer people with crazy hair colors, and fewer mini skirts, I think. Maybe a little more cleavage, but not too much. Still, Japanese women are prettier? Yeah, by far. Although there are some very, very pretty Taiwanese women too.